All right, time for a May TBR. May is exciting. May is kind of a reset for me. Ending spring semester, preparing for summer semester. Hypothetically, I have time to read. But the little stumble in that plan is my in-laws are going to be in town, which is great. Love seeing them, going to be fun to hang out with them. But between not having my commute, which is where most of my reading has been happening consistently, and my in-laws being in town, so not really knowing what time I'm going to have for reading, because it's not like when I see my grandma when we read together, like we're going to actually probably talk and do stuff, which is like fine. And reading together is doing stuff, but it's just, I didn't realize till I got older that's just not a thing people do in the same room quietly with each other. Regardless, I don't know what reading's going to look like, so I'm hoping this isn't too ambitious. I do want to get to everything on this list, and we'll see what happens. Starting with my Patreon gets to vote for me to read something each month. Sometimes I make it themed, like a themed video idea, and other times I make it like a book. This month is just going to be a book. And I was basing it off of my quarter reset, where I looked at my goals and I looked at all the releases that I had or hadn't gotten to yet that I'm still interested in that came out the first 3 months of the year. And one of the books that I have on my TBR that I've been wanting to get to that did somehow win by like 2 votes, because these things are almost always like 3-way ties somehow, is Womb City, which I think will be very thematically appropriate for Mother's Day. One way or another. I mean, this is a science fiction horror, cyberpunk, about body autonomy. This woman, I believe, doesn't really have that much control over her body because of the tech that we're looking at. Potentially her husband does. I don't know how much agency you have over childbirth and things like that. And I think it's going to be dark. It's going to be unsettling. It's going to be purposefully uncomfortable. That's what I think this is going to bring to the table, based a lot on the fact that I've read short works by this author, and they are almost always very unsettling. So yeah, darker. It's a dark story for Mother's Day, but yeah, ghost story exploring motherhood, memory, and a woman's right to her own body. Should be a good time, hopefully. And each quarter we read a short story collection in my Patreon, and so the first quarter we did Never Whistle at Night, which is very good. And this one I'm excited because I only have 2 more Octavia Butler to read, and one of them is the short story collection, or maybe it's a novella collection, I don't know, but Bloodchild by Octavia Butler. Been wanting to read this for a while. We're reading it together. I actually got this copy when I was in New York City a couple summers ago at one of their indie book fairs in Brooklyn, which was very fun, and I really like it. So we're going to be reading this. It's not too long. It's been on my shelf. I have like a whole shelf of short story collections I haven't read yet, so already doing my goal of these are 2 things off my physical TBR. Yay. Similarly, there is a book club happening with Jess Owens for Book Community Read, and I need to get to it, and I almost forgot, but that's why I make these TBRs, because then I remember, oh yeah, you said you were going to read it, and this is Living Resistance. I believe we're going to have this conversation like in the first 2 weeks of May. And I have the audiobook, and I have the ebook, and I just need to get to it. It's just a kind of workbook nonfiction, because we were trying to focus on, after reading Freedom is a Constant Struggle, finding works that could help us figure out how we can enact some things. And because we're kind of at the point where we've been learning a lot of stuff and we have anger, and now what are actions we can do? And hopefully this will be a good conversation starting point sort of situation. I am still working on 7 Surrenders. I don't think I'm finishing this. As I'm filming this video, I only have a couple days left in the month, and I haven't picked it up. So this is probably a May read, which is exciting. And like, who knows? If I read this and I love it, which all signs point to it's going to happen, I have the other 2 books in the series. And I'm not saying I'm going to marathon it, but if like the stars align, I have the free time, I have the energy and the want, I'm going to let it happen. I don't think it will, but I'm excited to get into this. I think because I'll have less audiobooking time, I should have more physical reading time if I make the time for it. And so this is one of my physical reading books. So I'm really excited. And this is also part of our series read along in the Patreon, which is a little less structured because our main series we're going to read this year is The Burning Kingdoms, which we're not starting that till we get closer to the release of The Lotus Empire, which is going to be so fun. I'm so excited for that. But the first book is Too Like the Lightning, which is maybe my favorite book of the year so far. So I'm excited to continue on with its sequel. And so far, 3 of the 4 books I've mentioned are sci-fi adjacent, so we're doing good with the year of sci-fi continuing. Probably the rest of these are not science fiction. One I should get to eventually, because we're going to talk about Words of Radiance and Edge Dancer on Roger's channel soon, so I need to reread Edge Dancer. I reread Words of Radiance not long ago, but I should get to Edge Dancer. This is about a character, Lift, who is an Edge Dancer, which I guess is in theory based off, an arbitrary personality quiz, the group I would be a part of if I was a Radiant. And she's just a precocious child with mysteries. The Cosmere affects her oddly. And it's just a side adventure with her before we start the events of Oathbringer. So it's kind of plot-wise slightly important that you know sort of what happens, but it's not like super important. There are pancakes. People love to hate Lift and love to love Lift. I guess I'm probably more middle of the road. I just think that like Sanderson likes writing precocious young whip people. And that's what she is. She's just a little precocious thing doing her stuff. And so when you're with her for a long period of time, it can be exhausting. I like the little stints we get with her in Oathbringer. I think that's a little more of a balance. More fantasy, I guess, to discuss is I want to finish Gardens of the Moon, which I know I haven't finished yet. And like, I think I want May to be the month where, because I should have more time, I either finish Gardens of the Moon, or I'm like, actually, you were ambitious and had ideals, and you should just wait until like you have less on your plate, and then you can get to Molassin. Like, I own all the books. It's gonna happen one day. But I do think, and this kind of comes from, I watched Mara's video recently where she tried to reenact how she used to read, and it kind of like ended poorly. Spoiler alert. I mean, it's in the thumbnail. I'll link her video down below, but it had me like thinking, it's just like trying to force yourself to be the type of reader you're not just doesn't always work. Like, it's fun to play around. But like, for example, for me, I don't mind learning to DNF. That's okay. That's I think a trait that's been added to my toolbox in a way that is beneficial for me. But pausing, this is a thing a lot of people are better at doing than me, or reading something over an extended period of time. It doesn't matter how long it is. If I'm reading it for more than 2 or 3 weeks, I feel very weird about it. I feel like it should be done now. Even if I objectively know I haven't spent the time on it. Or it's just like really, I don't like the stutter stop of like, I was reading this for a while and then I stopped. Now I'm back into it and then I stopped. Like, I'm better with that with TV shows, but I'm really bad at that with books. So it's kind of one of those things where it's just like, I thought maybe if I just read a little bit at a time, it would be fine. But it's really affecting my enjoyment of the situation. And so I think maybe that's something I reckon with May. Let's, figure that out. But on the flip side, say I do DNF Gardens of the Moon. I have been staring at this book for a long time, The Wolf. And I think this is like a really fun next fantasy trilogy for me to try out. And I have the first book. And it's on my series to try, I think, in this year. I don't know, I made that video back in November, but I'm pretty sure that's why I bought this book. So I would love to try it. And maybe if I read this, Leanna will finally read Lightbringer, which if you know, you know. She, in theory, likes Red Rising, but hasn't finished that book, but has read this one, again, for like the 9th time. So I've been curious about this. I don't know if it'll actually work for me, but if I don't finish Gardens of the Moon and I want like a denser fantasy to like dive into, I think this might be the one. I don't know anything about it. I know it's secondary world fantasy, I think, based off culture. Like, I think it's based off a thought experiment of like, what if things went differently? I don't know, like maybe Neanderthals are more of a factor than humans. War, rivalry, and honor in a world where the fiercest enemies are always closer than they seem. Well, if that's not a generic fantasy headline, I don't know what is. But I've just heard good things from a bunch of people who have similar and different tastes from me, so I just wanted to try it out for myself. Okay, so, and this is another science fiction. I don't know if I'll get to it, but like, it's worth just mentioning that Borders of Infinity is the next Verkosigan book. It has 3 novellas in it. I don't think they're short stories. I think they're novellas. And yeah, this is next up. I think they're all Miles stories. And like someone got me excited in my comment section lately being like, oh, you're getting from the point where Verkosigan's fun to like downright amazing. And I'm like, oh, that's exciting. Because I've already been having a blast reading the Verkosigan books over the past year, I want to say. Like, I started around a year ago. And like, I'm not making like super speedy progress, but like I've been consistently picking them up and having a great time. So yeah, eventually I have to figure out like where's a good stopping point to like do a mini should you read for it, because it's like I'm not going to wait till I finish all 16 books. And I have read quite a few now that I could at least comment on like certain things. I want to wait till after Borders of Infinity, because one of the bigger discussion points I guess you could have with Verkosigan when recommending it to people is like, where do you start? What's the reading order? And Borders of Infinity is one where like a lot of people are like, you should really read this novella before this book. And we purposely waited to wait for the collection. So there are novellas in here that chronologically take place before books we have read in the series already. Like I think before Seed of Kanda and stuff. So I guess I'll see you in real time if that mattered. Because I think after this, we're pretty much in publication and chronological order for the most part, except for like this one book that is so early that we are putting it into a specific spot based off Bejeweled's order. So I just feel like maybe I'll have opinions on if like I would have done something differently or not, where I would recommend starting, etc. Maybe that's the plan. I'm excited to read it regardless. And then Similarly, another series I've been reading is 100,000 Kingdoms. Well, that's not the series name. The Inheritance Trilogy. And I'm reading the third book right now, and I think I'll finish it in the month of April. But there's still a novella and the short stories, and I love them so much. There are definitely things you only read if you like love the trilogy. Oh, the novella might be useful for anyone, but like the novella is so sweet, and I can't really talk about it a lot because it kind of spoils the trilogy, even though it's about a character that's not in the trilogy at all. But I really liked how we got to visit a different part of the world. I really like the birth of a godling. I think it's fantastic. And then the short stories are actually like, they take place between the books, but last time I read the collection afterwards, and I think I'm going to enjoy doing that again. So those are on my list, but those are short things. I don't think they'll take too much of my time. And the last thing is a hope. It's a strong hope. My library hold says in 3 weeks I get this book, and maybe it'll be sooner, but Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, everyone's been raving about. I like her other works. I want it. It's about to be summer. I want it. And like, obviously, I could just buy it. This is always an option. But if I could just be patient, I think in May I'll get to read it, which is incredibly exciting. So that's the tentative May TBR. I'm happy because like my goal, like I said, is to touch like a few TBR books a month, and like 4 of them are all TBR books. So that's pretty dope. Like, I'm not overwhelmed by my TBR card, but it's just nice that that's naturally still working, that I have books on my TBR that excite me to read. Like, I think that's more the metric we're going for here. It's like, do I want to read what I own on this thing? And since whenever I make my TBR, it is like, yeah, you do want to read that, and it's on your thing. It's like, cool. Buying things that are relevant for me right now in this moment. Love it. Love it for me. So yeah, let me know what you're going to be maybe reading in May. Is it going to be a good reading month? Do you think it's going to be busy, hectic? I know this is like a time of year that's kind of like you get into summer mode and everyone either has vacations or maybe work gets busy or slower. I don't know. For me, it's a weird thing, and it's my first time experiencing the transition from spring to summer, and I have no idea what's in store. And there's also Mother's Day weekend in the United States. It's going to be a busy, fun time. If you just want to leave an emoji to let me know you're here, leave a wolf, because I mentioned the book The Wolf, and we haven't done a wolf in a while. I think that's valid. And otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.